Alright, so now I believe everything should be working. I'm gonna switch now into what I like to edit on, which is Photoshop, but I like everything to be kind of minimal, so I don't really like to show off a lot. So it's gonna look something like that. And this is going to be what we will be editing today. So she kind of wants to have um so this is the photo that we're gonna be working on. The good and bad parts that I can see right away is that it's a good photo of her, but we start seeing right away some things. For starters, this is the one reason why I'm not a big fan of Photoshop of the iPhone portrait modes or smartphone portrait modes, is that for a lot of smooth edges like her arm, it's actually really good. It kind of like gets on her elbow a little bit and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's nothing that people don't really mind. However, when it comes to like hair and other boundaries, you get to see like her dread here gets cut off, which kind of sucks, especially because they kind of have like this highlight that, if it was all black hair, you can play it off as it's just out of focus. But when it turns into something brown like this that just kind of gets smudged, it looks kind of bad. Same thing here in these little gaps. And you might be saying like, oh, it does, you can't really tell and stuff like that because it's too far away, it doesn't really matter. And that kind of makes sense until you could really see them like right here, just like a random smudge spot right here, you know. But for the most part, this is a pretty good starting point, especially for artists that just want to get out there. The portrait mode is pretty good. If you're gonna see it on Instagram, this part might not be coming out. You throw in a filter or two, and it's gonna get you the result that you kind of want. So it doesn't really matter as much for that. However, we will also be going into the we will also be going into Alright, I'm still not used to this. I'm going to do this just so you don't see all my files and all my very, very messy workload. But we're going to go into now into a album cover kind of template, which is blank because I don't really use it as like a template. It's just the dimensions. It's a square and it's 3000 by 3000, which is the minimum that Spotify wants you to have your album covers. So if we get this right, her picture that she took with her iPhone or with someone's iPhone, and you drag it into this picture, you get to see that the cover itself, her own portrait, is just the right size. So if you're gonna be using iPhone pictures, I would say this is actually a pretty good size for the album covers, right? Usually, um, and with more and more smartphones, they're having bigger sensors. Like the S20, it's like a 108 megapixel camera, but for now, it's actually a pretty good size. If you did want like a 4000 by 4000, which if we did something like that, which is not too uncommon, especially for like the high kind of photos. If you do drag that into a 4000 by 4000, this is how the picture looks, right? And so you would have to increase it, right? Which kind of it kind of sucks. Sorry, I'm just sending a message to my friend. But that's something that you should take notice is if you really want a high quality picture, you should ask one of your photography friends. A lot of the old cameras, if they're like maybe 3 4 years old, most of the cameras that are like $300 to $500, which is kind of a lot if your first camera, but if you're gonna take it serious, you're gonna take a photography class or you're gonna do something with video, they're actually gonna be really, really good for a long time. but they're gonna be printing at 5,000 by 4,000, so it's gonna be a lot bigger, and then you can do a lot more. For example, let's say no to this. For this one, if let's say that we don't want her as the whole picture, right? We just want to zoom in. Essentially, it's cropping, but if you just want to zoom in on her, and let's say we do something like this, when you see it, you start seeing that there's lack of detail because the iPhone kind of compresses your video, so your picture. So even though it's big enough, you really start to see that like a lot of the features in her face and stuff like that really start looking kind of smudgy, and that's just so it could save data, so that way your what's it called, your phone like storage space can take up as many photos. You could start seeing here that it just turns like weird black, which is like cool for, it's cool for normal pictures, for you're just gonna take a picture of your kid or something. But when it comes to like your artist profile, you really want the best quality. So in case someone says, hey, let's take a good picture of you, let's put this on your Spotify page or something like that, and someone's gonna be watching it like on their TV or something, you really don't want it to look like that, where you're having these, especially because TVs really accentuate the blacks because they want everything to look extra dramatic. It's gonna look something like this, because TVs really like contrast for some reason. And I don't know why. I don't know why TVs do that. So dumb. But they add a little extra contrast in your photo, so when you look up, this whole black is just gonna be pretty much blacked out on your TV, right? Which is kind of dumb. But that's kind of what you start to see. Hey, what's up? Can you see the chat on the screen? Thank you. Thank you for the question. So, first of all, I just want to see if the chat works as well, because on my side the chat seems to be working. I don't know if you can see it. Let me know if you can see it. Oh yes, it works. Nice. Yeah, how do you get those crisp images with a phone? So, for one, what the phone does is it just compresses everything. So what should you be doing? One, getting a better phone first of all. Two, there are ways to do it, but you have to use like Bridge or another software. Please don't use free software as much as I like it, because that's kind of how everyone starts off. You really need like an Adobe or like a DaVinci to kind of upscale those things without losing it, especially because they compress. Or three, if you do have a phone, check if your phone has high resolution pictures. So instead of it saying like image size small, even though it's gonna save it with the biggest resolution, it's gonna compress it a lot more. So if you think about it in music, it's like increasing the audio or increasing the length but reducing the bit rate, right? Because it's the same thing as data, so it's just bit rate. And so editing, better camera sensor, or better bit rate. Those would be the three things that I would say helps, right? And so now the next thing, let's go back into the editing. Let me take off these. And I'm going to guide you guys through everything. So if you guys have any questions, just let me know. I'm also hearing myself echo. So if you sometimes hear me stutter, or like, I fail to catch my words, just because I hear myself, just to make sure that nothing's going wrong. And it kind of like makes me trip on my own words. But we're back to the editing. So rule number one about any picture is framing, right? So there are one things that I like to do is called the rule of thirds. And so I don't call it, everyone calls it this, but essentially you have three panels right here, right? 1, 2, 3. And you really want these panels. So let me see if I can do it here. Let me see if I could show you what new guide. A new guide. Go grid, right? So this is kind of the grid that I like to use for math tutorials and stuff like that. But if we go to price grids and slices, and we do every cent, and then we do 33, and then subdivisions we'll just do like 5 or something, and then make the grid color something like a cyan, which, let me do it again because it looks kind of like too, I don't want to say stupid, but stupid, you know? Divisions, I have to put one, or one. So these are the rule of thirds, right? And you really want the subject, or a general rule of thumb, if let's say you're not into editing and stuff like that. Hey, what's up, Sid? So let's say that you want your picture just to look aesthetically pleasing, right? You're a new artist and you're just trying to understand more or less how you want to do stuff, and then you want to take some good pictures, but you don't want to pay someone to do it and you want to do it yourself. A good rule of thumb is to always place subjects where these T's are, or where the crosses of these rule of thirds are. So if you move this here, and then let's say that let me see if this image is good enough. We expand this and we do something like this. Her face is on the T. And now let me take this off. Okay. Oh, it was with this one. This looks like a pretty good picture. It's just pleasing to your ears. Ears? Your eyes. You could do the same thing here if she's looking the other way, or you could do it here. The bad thing about this is if people don't know much about framing, they're just gonna put you dead in the middle, and that's all you have to work with, right? So I'm just gonna take the original image and delete this one. So that's one of the things about framing that beginners kind of have trouble dealing with, and it's nothing wrong, it's just that we're kind of used to it. Like if you see all your birthday party ones, they always put the birthday person in the middle, which kind of makes sense because you want to be symmetrical. But when you're being artistic, you want it to be a little bit different. That's one of the things that I really like to show to people, and that's kind of how you can help people understand that you're paying not just for the money, or you're not just paying because you think it's gonna get you better results, but because it will, right? It's like little psychological things that you start to see. So now let's go into this photo. It's very right in the middle, which is okay because if you're gonna be doing something like music, I wouldn't mind this because at least they left this kind of stuff kind of empty. So what I see right away is, all right, we could probably put text right here, right? That's kind of the thing that I like to see so far. Now, the other thing that I see here is like a fake depth of field, but it works here because you don't want the random tree stump that's coming out of her head to kind of be in focus. But most of the time when people take pictures, they don't really use portrait mode, and so you would have this tree stump just coming out of her head because it would be on focus, which cameras like DSLRs or mirrorless cameras, they actually help you with that. They do like the depth of field, which requires a lot of glass to make this out of focus. Now in this picture, you also get to see that they have a little ukulele here. It took me like 30 minutes to figure out what this was. I thought it was a little gun. I don't know why I thought it was a gun, but it just looks like a little gun. And then I thought it was a pepper. I'm like, why does she have a... It didn't make any sense to me. But then I started, it was in the night, so don't flame me for that. But yeah, that's something that we're going to be working on, right? We're going to be working on taking this out, and then the rest is going to be something to do with the picture itself. So let's say now, what kind of music does she make and stuff like that? And I checked out her SoundCloud, and she does a little bit more mellow, kind of like soulful music. And so what I wanted to do was make it look like it's some like a newly discovered solo soul kind of song, you know, like one of the ones that like your grandma listens to when she's cleaning and stuff like that. The ones that you go into like your grandparents' house and then they're like, that's the only thing they're listening to on their old gramophone, that kind of stuff. So now we're here, and what does that mean for the soul? Soul for me feels like a little bit older, a little bit more classic, but a little bit faded. And so that's kind of what I want to go for in this picture, fade stuff. So now let's go actually into the Photoshop. Enough explaining. We want to get rid of this ukulele, right? So how do we take it off? There's this cool tool here called the patch tool, or you just click J, right? And then it does it for you. And all it does is it's going to say like, okay, we're going to get it from the source, which is right here at the top, or to the destination. This doesn't matter. You always just, most of the time, just click source. And then you want to put content aware. What content aware does is it looks at all the layers. So it would look at layer number 2 and the background. But we don't want it to look at the background. We want to take this off. So we're just going to look at all of layer 2. And this, what it does is it samples pixels throughout all similar pieces, which would include her. But if we sample pixels around here, it'll try to blend it in. So if that makes any sense, I'll show you through like an example, right? And if we do something like we move this to like, oops. Oh, my bad. Sample all layers. So if we move this, you get to see that this part is going to be the new sample. If we click it right there, it's gonna use those pixels to try and blend it. And you get to see right here, and I keep hitting my mic, my bad. We could see right here that it does like this blend, and it tries to blend it in as best as possible, right? So it looks dumb over there, but if we take similar pixels, like let's say somewhere around here, right, it just made it. It blended it. The bad thing about this, and the bad thing about the fake depth of field, is that right here they apply a blur which isn't as strong as over here. So because it's artificial, when you move it here, the depth of field, the mathematics of it get a little wonky. Like this should be this, because this isn't as blurred, the side right here shouldn't be as blurred as it is right now. It should actually be somewhere in between this and like this, but instead it jumps from this all the way to this intensity, which we don't like. So what you want to keep doing is looking for areas that have similar like blendedness. So I'm just gonna keep doing this until I find some place where I feel like this is kind of good enough. See, so that's not good. Maybe somewhere around here, which in a normal camera, there you go, we found a pretty good one. So in a normal camera, we wouldn't have to struggle so much to find that kind of blurriness, right? And let's say that even right now, I'm not really liking this part here, the bottom. We just redo it again. We look for somewhere that's kind of close, and there you go. Now with the ukulele that was there, boom. Now the whole focus of the picture is her, right? Alright, just making sure you guys aren't talking in the chat, because I can't see the chat. Now I know why people who are streaming, they have like multiple screens. I gotta keep flipping between tabs and stuff like that. I wish I could show you the setup that I have right now. It's pretty nice for a new setup, but it's kind of like, it's not optimal for streaming because I just kind of like want to record stuff. But yeah, that's besides the point. I'm just complaining. We got this out of the way, and to be quite honest, whoever took this picture, even though they have like a little few like technical like errors, is kind of good enough already. So in terms of this, the only other thing that I would probably want to do in terms of like fixing it through like Photoshop intensely is maybe get rid of some of her blemishes, which like if you see her skin, there's like nothing wrong, right? But there are maybe a few things that I would personally take away, like this tiny little bump, right? And you can use it with the patch tool and circle it around, or there's this other tool that's like right here called the spot healing brush tool. You click on it and it does the same thing, except that when you click on something it samples around that circle, right? So to make it match better, you want to make sure that the sample size is as small as possible. And then something that I noticed is just click on this little piece right here. One sec. Let me sample all layers. The one thing that I keep forgetting. And there. Right? So the tool, it just samples around it. So if the circle's right there, it'll sample things around it. So let's say that I'm gonna sample let me change this color to black. I want to sample this part right here, right? It gets this area and then it'll get all the pixels and all the textures in this area right here, and it'll say, all right, all this, we're gonna use it to blend what's in this black little circle. And so that's how you end up going from that little blemish, which again is not too bad. I don't want you guys to think that I'm blaming her, but boom, just takes it out. Now, another thing that I see from her is nothing much. Like for the most part, it looks nice, especially when you're gonna do an album cover. Why do you want to look like a like this isn't a Vogue photo shoot, right? They want you to see you as an artist, right? So besides that little tiny blemish, which like if you go back and forth, that's all we're gonna do to this photo in terms of like intensity of the edit. Sometimes when you got real like messy people and they're like, oh, I don't like my face, it should be softer and stuff like that, then we can do some other stuff, which I could also show you right now. So let's say that we did want to soften her skin a little bit more. We get those two together and then we convert it to a smart object, and all that does is it prepares it so that way we can throw in some filters. And these aren't filters that are like that's like Instagram. Oh, the echo. There's echo. Let me see why there's echo in here. How's this? Let me know if this is a little bit better. But thanks for letting me know, because I needed to figure out, I need to know all my settings before everything's good. So let's say, all right, we got this. Also, type in the chat, man. I'm not really looking at my phone. Alright, so I'm checking the audio and it seems to be fine now. So let's go back. Alright, so now that we created a smart object, it's time to make it into throw it into get started. Get into Camera Raw. Now I don't know if you can see this. Can't. So that's something that I will work on for the next live stream. But all I'm doing is I opened up Camera Raw, which is on the filter tab of the top if you're using Windows. If not, then you just they should have it on the Mac. But all I'm gonna do is going to click this filter that reduces texture, and all the texture does is spots where there's where there's like little lines or where there's small contrast, and just reduces it. So if you see something like this, and let's zoom in, this is her face, right? And then with the filter on, it doesn't take off everything because I didn't put it as intense. It can take off everything, but you get to see just kind of how it reduces some of the overall texture in her face. The bad part is it also reduces some of the overall texture in other places. So like if you look at her pants right here, if you take this off, you get the lines that are like in every pair of like joggers, or I don't know what they call them, with pants. But when you add them on, it looks fake. Like you get to see that everything just kind of gets mitched, like all weird, right? I don't even know what to say. The other good thing is that if you do that, it kind of takes off the wrinkles in your clothes. And again, I'm not trying to flame her, but it's just some things that you could kind of see. So now, what's the next step? The next step is once you use this, you only want to apply it to the face. So we're gonna get the mask, and what the mask does is it says everywhere that's white, that's where the filter goes. Right? Hold up. I'm getting another person into the stream. Now anything that's white, that's where the filter gets placed. Also the smooth skin gets placed, right? But if we invert it, anywhere that's black is where it doesn't go. So right now, right here in this black thing, and I think I can make it bigger, it's saying that in this picture, this is how much is being shown. This is how much the smooth skin effect is being shown, which is nothing, right? So now that we're here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over her face, and I'm just going to be applying the filter. So now I'm gonna make my brush a little bit bigger. Something like this, and then not as strong. And my brush, I like to put the flow down to like 40-ish, just because when you first do this, it'll give you just how much intensity you want in terms of the white. So let's say that my whole flow was 100, and I start painting over. The first time that I paint over something, so if we do something like this, look at the black, the first time I do it, it turns automatically white. But if we bring down the flow to like 7, the first time I do it stays kind of gray, and you could keep layering, so that way you can see, all right, this is how much white I really want to put to get the perfect amount of like face smoothing. So I'm just gonna be doing small spaces where I feel like kind of needs it, and maybe bump up the flow a little bit more. And it's just, again, if we go to this one, it's just enough so you could kind of like just remove a little bit of her details, but not a lot, just to make it feel a little bit softer. And you really get to see it when it's on the highlights. The thing is, just because our eyes don't really see a lot of shadows too well, see right there, I don't really like it. But just doing a little bit of smoothing, and that is kind of what you want to do. Now if you go to the before and after, see, not too much, but it did make her feel like she is made out of like perfect like clay. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what that means, but bro, I'm just talking out now. So now we got this, and everything else looks fine. Now we're gonna go into the a little bit more artistic side, and we're going to be doing a little bit more of the artistic side, which is getting these kind of like blacks to be a little bit more faded, like I said, right? So we're gonna make a layer and we're gonna do curves. And what curves do is it maps, this is like pretend it's like a normal grid, right? The dark is dark and then the white is white. And it says for the darkest dark right here. Can you guys see this? Oh. So it's basically like an X and Y curve, and it just dictates how much, where you want to map certain values, and I'll go into more detail later. But essentially all I want to do is pull the black to be higher, so that way it gives it that faded effect. So this is like the dark, and then the more we pull, eventually all the darks start becoming into lighter colors until we get into pure white, right? But we don't want that. We just want enough so that the blacks look faded, as if this has been out for like a very long time, that the printing kind of left, right? Like this, the ink is kind of running out. Not only that, but then we pull it a little bit and we just keep messing with it until it looks good enough, right? Somewhere there. Then I start noticing, oh, the whites look kind of nice, but in a real scenario, the whites would kind of start coming out a little bit. And then we do want to add a little bit more contrast, just a little bit, just so it could show that like someone was editing this. So if we go back from this to this, you see the harsh black now turned into like a softer gray, and this looks a little bit more worn out, which I like really like. Then we want to add a little bit more color, especially because if you do something like this, you get to see it's kind of like black and there's some like gray and stuff like that, but we want to give it a uniform color. So we go into a thing called color balance, which helps you adjust how much of a color is in the photo, essentially. So it kind of says like, all right, all the white stuff or all the neutral colors, we're gonna add more yellow, or we're gonna subtract yellow and add more blue, right? And so I want this again to look a little bit more naturey, and because the grass is yellow in the background, here we just end up essentially getting the yellow, and we match it to the rest of the photo, right? So now we add a little bit of yellow. I'm gonna add a little bit more red as well, just because her skin tone is like, we don't want her skin tone to look too yellowy, like she's sick. We want to add just a little bit more back, and that's something that looks nice. So if we go back to the normal one, you see there's like blue in her shirt, and you know, here it's all white, and the tree is yellow, and here's gray, and gray is usually a little bit cooler, but with this yellow filter on just a little bit, everything looks a little bit more uniform. It looks a little bit more sunsetty, which I kind of like. And then with the curves, ooh, now it's starting to look faded and like old, kind of singing and stuff like that. It's kind of cool. Now, what's next? The next thing that I liked, and I was playing around with this yesterday, was adding this like faded effect. Thank you. Thanks for putting in the chat, man. Thanks. Happy face. So now that this is kind of like this cool effect, we do want to add something that I was working on yesterday, which was how to use gradients to make this a little bit more aesthetic, right? And this is how you add the modern touch to it. Is I'm gonna make a new layer, and this one I'm gonna use my gradient tool, which is this one, to create its own little its own little gradient. And what a gradient is I feel like everyone kind of knows what it is, but then sometimes I just overthinking. Is if it has two colors, it takes the first color and it keeps blending it until it becomes a second color, right? So if we make a gradient that's like, let's say, uh red, and then the second color is blue, and then we do the gradient, it goes from red into every color until it reaches blue. So then you get to see here there's a little like purple pink, right? It's kind of cool. But what I want to do is make the gradient actually go from some sort of purple to like a darker blue. So how does that look? Gradient looks something like this, right? And this looks kind of cool. So I'm just gonna do something like this. From here to here, the gradient is going to be this color, right? And you might be thinking that this looks kind of weird. So what we do is we could also keep messing around until we kind of find the right one. And you're wondering why I'm doing this, and it'll make sense when we make like a little bar. It's gonna look like a little camera like distortion, a little like, you know, when you take pictures and then there's like a little rainbow somewhere in the photo. That's something that I want to create but in Photoshop. So now that we have this, we start seeing that, oh, look, it's adding that like extra blue color, and we get to see here exactly what I'm going for, this effect, right? Like a little color shift. So I'm going to make it so that only certain colors, and we start to see what I'm doing, only certain colors will be affected by this, or only certain light values. So I'm just doing this so a lot of the darker colors will get this weird tint, but a lot of the light values are going to remain yellow. And now this looks kind of weird because it's affecting the whole photo, and I only want it to be this lower half. I'm going to add a mask, and then I'm going to do a gradient again. And this time, I'm only going to make it affect the bottom. So now it's adding this like weird like little tint to it, and then we just lower it down the fill, and it gives it that like weird shading, right? And so now if I keep playing around with it, it'll keep adding on this like nice effect. And it looks a little weird here, which means I just have to keep playing around with like the underlying layer till it looks a little something like this. Right now you have this like weird blue and purple, and actually for me it looks a little intense, so I'm gonna drop it down a little bit until it looks something like this, right? And it just adds a little bit of balance, especially because our face is here. You're being drawn just to this, and maybe to this general area which is in the top, and in a good photograph that includes like people and a lot of things, you really want it to have balance, which means that this side should have as much attraction as this bottom side. This left side should have just as much attraction to this right side. The corners should be attracted to each other, right? So if her hand is here and her hand has like this little light shine, there should be something around this side. And because I noticed that this photo kind of had her face here, makes it like top heavy, that means something here at the bottom needs to attract viewers to see this part of the photo too. So what I do, I just added a little bit of color here. Now, which I'm seeing, maybe I need to add a little bit more fadedness. Like that. Now that everything's good, Oh, I actually like a little bit more color here. Increase the fill to from 40 to like 50 something. Now everything's looking really nice. The last thing I want to do is add some special effects. And what I mean by special effects, that usually for me just means, all right, I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna go online and just look up like vinyl uh texture or like vinyl paper, stuff like that. And usually when you do something like this, you want to check that nothing is like copyrighted and stuff. But just for these purposes, I'm gonna be using a random photo that I just find online. So what we're going to do is once I find it, take it into Photoshop, uh, copy, paste, and you see here it's kind of small, but that's alright because this is just for like demonstration purposes. We're going to scale it to somewhere around here, right? And so this is kind of how it looks. What we want to do now is just add into a different layer effect, and you see how with screen it kind of gives that old dusty feeling. We're gonna add it on as screen and then lower it so it kind of looks like it's part of the artwork, right? The other thing is you can change its light values. That way it gets like gets darker. Too much. So it adds a little bit more darkness to it, and then we reduce the fill. Keep, and right now I'm just experimenting with how I want it to look. If we reduce all of it, that's kind of how it looks. Not this one. With something like this on screen, it actually looks really nice, right? And we just keep messing with it. So we find the right kind of place. You keep experimenting with this until you kind of find like the right kind of formula for you and for your picture. But for now, I think I wanted to have it like this, so you get to see a little bit more texture. Other than that, you just keep experimenting until I find the perfect place to kind of like this. I kind of like. And all I did is I'm just playing around with the settings until I find something. You could keep also looking for like other blending modes. Some other ones like look a little bit more intense than others. But for this kind of purpose, I really like the screen one or the lighting one, but the screen one kind of gives a little bit more like texture here at the bottom. I'm gonna go with that one. Let me go back to light. This is all just personal preference. It's up to you how you kind of wanna do this. But for the most part, this is what the artwork is gonna look like. And then if you want to keep adding more stuff, another thing that you can do is add something like dust and scratches, which is the same place. You go to filter and then you're just going to render out some dust and scratches, and then you're just looking around. It's gonna be under noise. Oh, this is more like dust, actual physical scratches, which I kind of don't like. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just gonna leave it like this. The other thing that you can do is go back online and just look up like dust texture or scratch texture really quick. Let me look for one that I kind of do. Look for something like this. Copy image. Put it on another layer. And press and open tab. Copy image. Paste. There it is. These scratches are something that I feel like a lot of people so far, or like recently, have really people have really liked them. I'm kind of cool with them. Uh, but they are overworked a little bit. So what you really don't want it to be aggressive with them. A lot of people like to do something like that, which is like much for me. You just keep lowering them until you like see just a little scratches, right? You want it to look like a little wear and tear. But for the end result, you want it to look something like that, right? And so we went from this. These are scratches. This is vinyl texture. You really got everything. We bring out this one, original one here. It is somewhere. And then we get to see from this, which is a normal picture that someone took from their iPhone. They forgot to take this off. Everything's good enough that someone could turn it into a really good album cover, and this would be for something that she's working on called Earthquake. So this is something that I would be sending her. I checked to see that the textures are all copyright free and stuff like that, but for the most part that's exactly how things are going to be looking. So I'm going to send this to her and see if she likes it, but for the rest of the stuff, everything else should be pretty good. Now I kind of don't know what to say, so if you have other questions on how I did this, or you're more interested, there's just hit me up on like Instagram. But for the rest of the part, everything's good. You guys want to keep chatting, or should I just end it? Oh, I got a like, thanks. I also kind of want to keep doing this for the for the future. I don't know if I want to do this every Friday or every Monday, especially just right now because everything's quarantined. I'm like, man, I have nothing else to do. I might as well something that kind of is more into like that isn't gonna just waste my time. So I kind of want to do something like this, maybe every like Monday or every Friday, but it'd be up to like whoever's watching. And I've gotten like more people to be involved in this, which is pretty cool. Also, shout outs to Morgan. She's the one who gave me this photo, and she said, "Hey, let me." I told her, "Hey, can I work on something for you?" Um, I'm not really doing much. This is like a pretty good opportunity for both of us to kind of work together. I edit and stuff like that, and she kind of knows who I am, so she's like, "Oh yeah, sure." Send me this photo, and then this is kind of what I'm gonna send her now. Um, yeah, if there's no other questions, then I'm just gonna probably log off now. Probably gonna play a few games or something like that. Yeah, let me know if this was pretty good. Let me know other errors that I did and stuff like that, and not then. I'll catch you guys later. Got a message from. Oh, just looking at Instagram. Why is Ray like this? Him in the back. But that's for later. I'm gonna log off, and then I'll catch you guys soon. Peace.